Where would Shane Wright fall in a redraft of the draft class of 2022?
You are Locked On Kraken, your daily podcast on the Seattle Kraken, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Seattle hockey fans, welcome to another episode of Locked On Kraken, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where we bring you your favorite team, the Seattle Kraken, every single day. Just a reminder that we are not exactly every single day as we are in the off season, but my name is Erica L. Ayala. Whether it's 3 days a week, 5 days a week, or something in between, I am always here. Also, your co-host of the Women's Hockey Report that lives on the Locked On NHL channel. You've probably seen we've been doing a lot of NHL Seattle roundup here, some select interviews that we're integrating. But if you want to know beyond just the PWHL Seattle team, definitely check out the Locked On NHL channel for the Women's Hockey Report that posts every Saturday. Okay, before we get into the redraft of Shane Wright's class, want to let you know today's episode of Locked On Kraken brought to you by our friends at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. So we know that Shane Wright's draft controversial, to say the least. Our guy Shane came in as the presumptive number one pick for years. And that's not exactly what happened. Montreal did not take him number one, but the Seattle Kraken did take him at number 4. The article that I'm looking at here is by Scott Wheeler for The Athletic. His annual redraft and ranking review exercise. So there's a few things that happen in this article. We're mostly going to talk about Shane Wright, but I do think there's some other interesting nuggets that I would like to lean into here. So we're going to do the redraft by Scott Wheeler. Then I'm going to break down the March schedule. We've been doing that the last handful of episodes, and we're going to close the episode talking about another article from The Athletic talking about most improved teams leading into the upcoming NHL season. And I think this is an interesting list, especially given some of the comments that I've seen on YouTube, even on TikTok. So I want to talk about that for sure. The 2022 redraft. So this is from Scott Wheeler again at The Athletic. Now, he gives you his new redraft, which is the kind of header. Then he tells you where that player was actually picked and what his final rankings, I believe, prior to the draft were. So I'm going to skip to Shane Wright. Shane Wright comes in on this list at number 4, which is exactly where he was picked, at number 4 to the Seattle Kraken. He's a centerman for us. Now, Scott Wheeler, like many other people, did rank Shane Wright number 1 going into his draft. So he dropped 3 spots. Now, I'm going to read some of this to you because I think it's interesting given some of the conversations we've had here on the podcast about Shane Wright. Is he underperforming? Is he not getting enough minutes, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? It felt like people were starting to write off, pun intended. And then he had a really solid first full season in the NHL last year, registering 44 points in 79 games and finishing 4th on the Kraken in scoring, tied for 4th in the 2022 draft class with Cutter Gauthier, who played 3 more games than he did, and ahead of Marco Kasper and a few other players he mentions. Talks about his 20.9% shooting that he does feel will regress. Wheeler feels will regress, but also notes that his minutes should go up. So perhaps things will level out. And I want to stop there because the minutes that Shane Wright played comparative to how the fan base felt he should play, I think was a little disproportionate last season. I was okay with Shane Wright playing the minutes that he did. Given what we were hearing from Dan Bylsma, given the conversations I've had with Jessica Campbell, it did seem like psychologically more of the mental game for Shane Wright needed to mature to match physically how he had evolved his body. I've talked about this on the show before. I wasn't too mad. I can see where, especially how things ended for the Kraken last season, how you might want to make an argument for him playing more minutes. However, I agree with what Scott Wheeler is saying here. His minutes will go up. So I'm okay with being a little bit more conservative with Shane in his first full season in the NHL. So it goes on to say he's going to have a long career as a very good player in the league, even if we're never going to look back on him as a number one pick / exceptional status type. Overexposure has also resulted in over-analysis of Wright, including by fans. As for where I rank him here, he talks about there being 2 tiers in the redraft, 1 through 3, and then 4 through 12, roughly 13. Thought about ranking him lower than 4, and some would, but he belongs firmly in the second tier for sure. So that 4 through 12, 13, and I think at the front of it somewhere. So there's a lot in that, including that maybe there was an overreaction to Shane Wright coming into his draft that naturally led to a lot of what we saw in Shane's, in that 22-23 season. Just so much attention being paid to Shane that, again, was overemphasized. I didn't really understand it. I've said on the show, I got tired of talking about it. It's kind of honestly how I feel about covering Caitlin Clark at times. It's like there are so many storylines with the player because of their skill, because of, again, the circumstances. And it got exhausting to have to beat the same drum because people couldn't move on. Like we gotta move on, we gotta move on in some respects and have a conversation that's rooted in sport and not some of the other things that come along with it that quite honestly are a little bit unrealistic, excuse me. Anyway, I digress. I definitely have thoughts on how Caitlin Clark is covered, and some of it is to the detriment of her actual basketball skill, which I just want to put out there. But again, listen to some of my women's basketball coverage if you want to know my thoughts there. But I'm saying I liken it to how it felt to cover Shane Wright coming off of this draft. And I do think that some of that has been shrugged aside. The Seattle Kraken not performing particularly well actually helps that. Although I did get a twinge of it. Again, I just noted that there was a little bit of, let me just say, I disagreed with the fodder that was like, Shane Wright needs more minutes. Who is he taking center minutes from? Who is he taking? Okay, you can make a case for Chandler Stevenson, and I get that. And I listen, there were times where I was like, get this guy out of here. You know what I'm saying? And with the amount of money that he's getting paid, that was never going to happen. And this is coming from a team that sent Philip Grubauer down, that made a statement, air quotes for those on audio, that made a statement with Oliver Bjorkstrand. You know what I'm saying? So, but there's just certain things were never going to happen. Shane Wright was not going to get more minutes by taking them from Chandler Stevenson. So then maybe you look to Matty Beniers. That's not the right answer either. Not only is the Seattle Kraken still hopefully on the tail end of development with Matty Beniers, and again, I've said Matty Beniers and what he needs from a development kind of pipeline or plan, very different from what Shane Wright needs. And so, you're not going to take those minutes from Matty B. I think maybe we got close to wondering if that was possible, given that, Maddie seems snake bitten at times, but what he was doing defensively, I'm sorry, my allergies are really acted up. What he was doing defensively, you didn't want to lose for a team that was quite honestly struggling defensively. So he wasn't going to get those. He wasn't going to get Matty B's minutes. So then it's third, fourth line minutes, and those should have been good minutes on a Seattle Kraken team that's struggling. Now, if you want to argue that, perhaps, but I wasn't really too put out by what we were seeing from Shane Wright. I do think comparative to the field, I mean, I can talk about some of the names that are higher than Shane Wright. I think and I will, because there's one player in particular that I think helps make my case for how I felt about the most recent draft, even though, yeah, I read the comments about y'all trying to poo-poo me saying take a defenseman. Okay, stop it. Like, y'all be trying to play me, and I don't always appreciate it. But anyway, I digress. I think we need to settle in, hunker down when it comes to Shane Wright's development. The other players ahead of Shane on this list, Uri Slafkovsky actually at 3 to the Arizona Coyotes, Scott Wheeler said if he could redraft. He had Slafkovsky at 5 in his original estimation. Of course, he went number 1 overall to Montreal. At number 2 in this redraft, Scott Wheeler has, this is the one I want to talk about. Left-handed defenseman Lane Huston. He was picked at 62 by the aforementioned Montreal. Scott Wheeler had originally ranked him ahead of the draft at 19. And this is what I want to read. Because, I mean, anyone who knows me, everydayers, OGers, I gobbled up this. I really appreciated these opening sentences here. What's more valuable, a good but not superstar first line center or an elite offensive defenseman? I think there's a case to be made either way, is what Wheeler says. Then he goes on to talk about Cooley, justifying that. He says, this one I'm proud of, though, because it's easier to find ways to talk yourself out of picking a player who profiled like Huston did at the time than it is to stick your neck out for him. Interesting. I love sticking my neck out for an underdog. So, but I hear you. This is an excerpt from what Scott wrote ahead of the draft. The reality is there aren't many defensemen Huston's size who play in the NHL, even as the game changes. And those guys have never been selected in the first round. But there aren't many players who like Huston but there aren't many players who play like Huston in hockey either. I often get asked just how high he'd go if he were 6'3", and the reality is he wouldn't be able to do a lot of what makes him so interesting at that size. He's a unique player who uses a light, though not powerful stride to create entries and exits, weave past coverage, escape pressure, and find or create seams. He sees the ice well as anyone in the draft, regularly identifying plays a step ahead of the opposition. So, and then goes on to say, I'm fascinated to see where he's picked, because I wouldn't shy away from taking him in the late first, and if he's around on day 2, it'd be a no-brainer. I mean, undersized defenseman, but who can hop up in the offense. I mean, yes. Yes. So he comes in at number 2 for Scott Wheeler. At number 1 to Montreal, Logan Cooley. So he was picked at 3, and in Scott's final rankings ahead of the draft was also at 3. So this is a change, saying Cooley should go number one overall. He leads the 2022 class in goals at 45, goals per game at 0.29, and leads forwards in assists per game at 0.41, points per game 0.69, or you can say it 57 points per 82 games through his first 2 seasons. He's also, quote, he's also the only player in the class who is his team's first line center, the only player in the class who has a 25 goal season, and one of only 2 players in the class with a 60 point season after registering 65 points in 75 games last year. He's second to Clayton Keller in team scoring. So high on Logan Cooley. Yeah, not looking forward to playing Utah. Coming up next on the Locked On Kraken podcast, let's talk about the March schedule. What stands out? Who are the teams and the games that I have circled on the calendar? And then we'll close with Seattle Kraken. Are they among the most improved in the NHL? Let's hear what an analyst had to say versus some of your comments in the last few episodes. Today's episode of Locked On Kraken brought to you by our friends at Game Time. And listen, we've all been there logging on early and waiting forever for concert tickets to go on sale, only to lose your spot for a show you've been dying to see. Live music should be about making memories, not dealing with the stress of ticket shopping. That's where Game Time comes in. Game Time makes getting concert tickets faster and easier than ever. Prices actually drop as it gets closer to showtime, and you can save up to 60% off with killer last-minute deals. If you're tired of endless scrolling trying to find the best deals, Game Time Zone Deals picks the best seats in your section for you. Ever wonder what your view will actually look like before you buy? The app can show you a panoramic seat view, so there are no surprises. And are you worried about what will happen if your plans change? Don't, with the Game Time guarantee. It has your back with cancellation protection and more. So take the guesswork out of buying concert and show tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem promo code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, thanks as always for making Locked On Kraken a part of your daily destination. Erica L. Ayala here, going to throw up this beautiful blue schedule for you because you can see March is nice and full. We got plenty to talk about when it comes to March on the other side of the Olympic break, which in and of itself is going to be interesting. Right off the hop, you see 5 home games for the Seattle Kraken from March 2nd to the 12th, includes getting through the trade deadline. Now, a bunch of games on the trade deadline in the NHL. The Seattle Kraken, not one of those teams. They have some time and will definitely be home during that trade deadline on March 6th, so we'll keep an eye out for that. In those first 5 games, Carolina, the St. Louis Blues, who I talked about on the last episode, Ottawa Senators, bully ballers for sure, the Nashville Predators, and the Colorado Avalanche. Then we take on Vancouver on the road, and on the second night of a back-to-back, come home to host the Florida Panthers. So there goes a back-to-back, a road home back-to-back. I don't love those. So yes, I'm keeping an eye on those 2 games. I don't love that. And we'll see that a few more times, not throughout the rest of this month, but a few more times this season. We close out the very short homestand 2 games, if you will, with the Tampa Bay Lightning. So that's 3 games in 4 days for the Seattle Kraken, which extends to 5 games in 8 days if you include that they take on the Nashville Predators on the 19th on the road, the Columbus Blue Jackets on the 21st, and then they make their trip to to Florida to take on the Panthers. So they hit the Panthers and Tampa Bay twice in this season, as well as the Predators here. Close out with Buffalo and Edmonton. Okay, here's the thing. Anytime you're playing the champs, let alone the back-to-back champs, always a good barometer. We'll get to see them in our barn at Climate Pledge Arena, but also take them on the road. Road Warriors. A nice little stretch of home games to begin, but then a decent amount on the road as well. This is getting back into the swing of things post-Olympics, so very curious to see how players will bounce back. Will we see some players take a rest day here and there? How will that impact the Seattle Kraken? I think that's going to be interesting. If I look at this schedule for March, again, the back-to-back Vancouver and Florida, that's the one that stands out to me. And then I'm going to stick with 2 teams, really 3 different teams here that I find intriguing because of how the cookie crumbles, so to speak. And that is us playing Nashville, us playing Florida, and us playing Tampa Bay twice, and in pretty short order here. So I'm curious to see what adjustments are made. How are we integrating players back who are away? Are there players that will have really been standout leading up to the Olympic break, or even coming out of the Olympic break, that we can give some starts to, some more minutes to? Because there could be a level of fatigue thinking about how you manage Philip Grubauer when you know you've got a road home back-to-back. You're playing some of the same teams, again, in short order: Nashville, Tampa Bay, Florida. So I think we'll see a lot of flexibility and the team having to be nimble in March. And I'm curious, not exactly a playoff scenario, but when you have 3 different franchises that you're playing in the same month, in the same 30 days, really in the same, I don't know, 15 or so days, what adjustments can you make? How much pressure do you put on the team to get it figured out if they don't quite get the result they want in the first matchup? So the gamesmanship for sure. I'm gonna circle again that Vancouver on the road, Florida Panthers at home. The good thing is that they don't have to travel to the East Coast, or really, it's not too bad of travel. But what are we going to look like on the second day of a back-to-back, taking on the defending Stanley Cup champions? That's probably my game to watch. I hold fast, stay true, right? I'm a little bit nervous, just, looking at the schedule in the end of July. Maybe I'll feel differently as the season marches along, but yeah, definitely keeping my eyes on that one. I think we'll learn a lot about that team, because we're assuming that Florida is going to be a formidable opponent once again. We'll close out today's episode of Locked On Kraken talking about an expert opinion on whether or not the Seattle Kraken is an improved team. And I want to compare that to some of your thoughts on, we had some nice comments on TikTok, and then of course on YouTube as well. That's coming up on Locked On Kraken. Seattle hockey fans, on yesterday's episode, I asked, can this current Seattle Kraken roster going into what we know going into 25-26, can they outperform offensively last season? Big question. I think Sound of Hockey had an amazing article. We broke that down. We did get a comment over on TikTok, on the Tiki Talk, from Raymond. Mason Marchment is so similar to Oliver Bjorkstrand. Again, something I want to explore a little bit more. What are we trying to do here? Be average? We aren't bad enough to get high draft picks, but not close to contending. I mean, that is the question, right? Raymond, that is the question. Thank you so much for your comment on TikTok. And that's where the frustration lies. For those who are everydayers, OGers, I'm anti-team tank. I threw a conniption last year when it was even suggested, because in theory, there's too much talent on this team to do that. And just philosophically, morally, whatever you want to call it, professionally speaking, I cannot stand tanking conversations. But I agree that this team is kind of looking like they're going to be in the messy middle once again. So what is the goal? I don't believe in tanking. I think you can see teams that struggled within the last decade, on and off perhaps, mostly on, that are maybe now starting to surge. Anaheim could be one of them. Arizona/Utah could be one of them. What does that mean for Seattle? We've not really, planted and staked our flag into the ground of being content with being bottom of the barrel. Is that changing? Should it change? I don't know. When is as soon as possible? That's the question I keep asking, but I digress. More comments on the Tiki Talk. It's either play for a top draft pick or it's a team that will barely miss the playoffs. Ouch. Yeah, we've seen that movie play out. Maybe it's a TV show, a drama, that has multiple seasons, but we've seen that before from the Seattle Kraken team, which is why I found it so interesting that the Seattle Kraken, in an article by The Athletic entitled, Which NHL Teams Improved the Most This Offseason, ranking all 32. And so it goes from most value added to least. Here's how teams changed this summer. The Seattle Kraken are top 10 behind San Jose, who's at 1, Montreal at 2, Anaheim, hello, at 3. That's already 2 Pacific Division rivals, and Montreal, who's, I think, more or less in our catchment area. At 4, the Carolina Hurricanes, dangerous, sounds kind of crazy. The Vegas Golden Knights, that's number 3. And who comes in at, I should say, that's the 3rd Pacific Division opponent. Vegas comes in at number 5 on this list. And then we are at number 6, a net rating added of +9. It talks about Andrei Burakovsky. I mean, that's really what this conversation is about. Offloading Andrei Burakovsky, saving money in the process. Talks about bringing in Mason Marchment, who, quote, looked like a top 6 caliber for the Stars, and for $1 million less too. $1 million less than Andrei Burakovsky. The Kraken look a bit more competitive going into next season. Now, here's the kicker. Quote, whether that should have been the plan given the current league landscape and the prize waiting for the league's worst team at the end of this season is an argument for another article. Okay, so basically, we're going to have this team tank conversation all of the upcoming season. I suppose I have to brace myself And if I had really sat down to think about it, which of course, everydayers, OGers, of course I didn't want to think about it. I cannot stand tanking. I can't believe it's a conversation often in sports. And yet here we are, and we're probably going to have to talk about tanking. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this is an improved team, a net rating added of +9, top 10 in the league. Maybe I'm wrong. I just don't feel like I'm wrong. I don't feel like I'm wrong right now. But that's why we play the games, get to see them in training camp, in the very short preseason, and, throughout the season. Again, my barometer, we absolutely should know this team's identity by December. If not, there are problems, which, again, looking back, almost started singing that Backstreet Boys song. Anyway, looking back, well, not sing today, probably. Looking back, if I had stuck to that, then maybe I wouldn't have gotten so upset about last year's team. But I was like, oh, the injuries, let's see how we navigated. And team tank. I'm anti-team tank, and I don't like that I'm probably going to have to talk about tanking this upcoming season. But I don't know. Let me know. Do you agree that they're a top 6 most improved team? Do you also agree with the article that maybe if that is the plan, and if they are indeed a better team, even marginally better than last year, should that be the plan? Now, granted, we don't know how the field is going to play out. And I keep telling you, there is a difference between being better comparative to yourself and being better comparative to the field. We talked about, low volume shots, or low danger shots, medium danger shots, high danger shots, and seeing the rankings there of teams that were playoff teams that had fewer low danger shots or more low danger shots than the Seattle Kraken. But parlaying that into, if you're taking low danger chances, hard angle shots, just trying to bank something off of the goaltender so they shrug it away to give yourself another option, that's potentially where this Seattle Kraken squad can improve. We talked a little bit about Marchment, net front presence, but it's not just a net front presence. It's hunting the puck below the goal line. It's hunting the puck in your offensive zone. I love talking about the 3 Fs, fun, fast, forechecking, emphasis on the forecheck, But then we also talked about special teams. There's a lot to improve. Goaltending, back-to-backs. I mean, we could go on and on and on, and we will break some of these down, not just continuing as we go on in the off season, but I'm sure in the regular season as well. Thank you so much for joining us here at Locked On Kraken. Already, subscribe to the Locked On Kraken network, subscribe to the Locked On Kraken podcast, wherever you listen to audio podcasts, or on YouTube. You can also follow us on TikTok. Again, read some TikTok comments today. Appreciate those. And follow me as your co-host of the Women's Hockey Report on Fridays as part of the Locked On NHL channel. Be kind to yourself. Be kind to others. We hold fast. We stay true. Loud and proud, we say, let's go Kraken. I'll catch you on the next episode. Peace out, everybody.